Looks like Arnold is prepping to take his throne back. All right, so some interesting news dropped a couple of days ago where Arnold, the great Arnold Schwarzenegger himself, has hinted at some possible movies upcoming for him in the future. And they're all sequels. So there are three main ones. You have Conan 3, Predator 2, and Commando 2, which I thought was a very interesting choice. Now, with Conan 3, it seems like it's an interesting story that is being, talked about. The surprising thing for me is that it's being written and directed, possibly, by Christopher McQuarrie, the man behind the last 4 or 5 Mission Impossible movies. He's never done a fantasy action movie before. However, people forget this, but he is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter. He wrote the script for The Usual Suspects. And so the man definitely has the competence to write a good script, as far as character development and a story that just kind of grips you and keeps you wanting to watch what is going to happen next. All right, so that seems kind of promising, And also from what Arnold has said, the story centers basically around Conan being king for 40 years. He is basically kicked out of his kingdom and he's trying to make his way back to be the ruler of whatever land it is that he is ruling. So I'm like, all right, it seems like fertile ground for a great story, great character development, some great tension. And of course, with special effects the way they are, it might be a more interesting, fantastical world, as is with the Conan from the books. Now, Predator 2, that we'll see because, apparently Dan Trachtenberg has been in talks with Arnold. He's got an idea for where to take the character of Dutch into. And all right, let's see, maybe. I've been a little wishy-washy, a little back and forth with how I feel about Dan Trachtenberg's, shepherding this franchise. I love Prey, I love Killer of Killers, was not a fan of Badlands, but I'll keep my mind open to see what can be done with Dutch and his journey in the Predator universe. The last one, Commando 2. Now, I'm on record saying I think Commando is the greatest 80s action movie. Not an action movie from the 80s, but just an action movie that came out in the 80s that has all of the elements that just about every single 80s action movie has. Everything from one-liners to ridiculous situations to just giant explosions and fights and great bad guys. Commando was just singular in that way. And one of the things that, I used to watch that movie constantly. Maybe once a week for a good long while there, I was watching Commando. And it wasn't until way later on as a teenager that I picked up on that last bit of dialogue in Commando where, he's blown everything up by himself. He saved his daughter, played by, the child, Alyssa Milano, and he's walking towards the plane so he can fly back home. And the general, General Kirby, says to him, "Until the next time." And Arnold turns back to him and he says, "No chance." And it wasn't until, way later, maybe I was like maybe 16, 17 or something like that. And I was like, wait a minute, because a sequel never got made. And that is definitely a movie that you can make a sequel out of. And on top of that, the little throwaway line from General Kirby basically hints at a sequel. And Arnold, if you haven't noticed, even though he's done 2 Conan movies, he has the 2 Terminator movies, he's not so big on franchises, And so And he's even been on record himself saying that, like, during the making of Predator, they approached him to sign a contract for the sequel, and he turned it down. And when I think somebody in the cast found out, he's like, "Why did you say no?" He said, you never say yes right away to a sequel. You got to give it some time, which would explain all the big distance, almost 10 years between Terminator 1 and 2. So the fact that he's doing it now, it could be something, who knows? I'll be open to it. I think he's a little too old to be running around shirtless, blowing things up, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, what about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, click subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.